You're listening to Sweep. I'm Ali Haidar.
And I'm Cole Townsend.
And we're joined today by our good friend, Andy Bell. Andy is a rising junior at Cornell University studying biopsychology.
That's the one. Good job.
It's an interesting major. Contrary to our previous guests, who all fall somewhere on the left of center, Andy is on the far right. Yes, I said far right. So prepare yourselves for the likely outcome of disagreement and debate. Andy, just so we don't misrepresent you as fake news, can you please name us or talk to us about your political stance and a little bit about your core philosophy?
Yeah, like what would you call yourself first?
Well, he summed it up pretty well already. He called me far right.
Fair enough. Okay.
No, I'm not far right. I'm to the right, and that's good enough for me.
Like, who? And we'll get into this, I guess, more later. But like, if there's a person who embodies your values, like a politician, who would that be?
Well, it's not Donald Trump.
It's not Donald Trump.
We're gonna get.
Well, you're educated.
Well, we're gonna get into that right now. It's not Donald Trump. I don't really, I wouldn't say that there's someone in office right now that is what I would call a perfect politician, because I don't think the perfect politician exists. Because that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Bernie Sanders.
And now we know. Thank you, because that answer to that question in a very roundabout way lets us know that you're a libertarian.
So anyway, I guess we'll go right into it. So, and you kind of touched on this. So, Andy, your politician isn't Donald Trump, but I guess tell us more about your opinion about that, more specifically why. Is there anything that you agree with him or disagree with him in his policy? This can range from like his character, from his pretty nasty rhetoric, or simply just the policies that he has been trying to get through Congress, or the very little that he has gotten through the Congress.
Well, look, I don't think that the political dichotomy should be revolving right now the way it is around whether or not someone likes Donald Trump. That's a pretty poor assessment of someone's political beliefs, because you've got people all over the spectrum that love him and people all over the spectrum that hate him. I think he's probably not a great guy, personally, because who is when you got that much money? But look, he's done a lot of good things for people, and he's done a couple of questionable things too. But I think in aggregate, he's doing okay, and he's certainly doing a lot better than his immediate predecessor, if you ask me.
So you said something about how he's not a good person, but that's what happens when you get richer. So that's going to tie in deeply with our next question. So, but I guess before we get into that, specifically, can you think of any policies that really resonate with you? Would it be, separating kids from their parents at the border, or simply appointing a Supreme Court justice?
Well, no, I'll actually be happy to jump into that. I am very proud that he's been doing that a lot less than his immediate predecessor. I would say that's a good thing, actually.
Separating children at the border less?
No, the fact that he's cut it down.
No, so we can all agree that the practice did in fact start under Obama, and I think we can all agree, the two of us here, we're not the biggest fans of Obama. He did some okay, he did some good, I guess, and he did a lot of, not so great. But separating children at the border and kind of starting that legacy is kind of, one of the worst aspects of his presidency. But Trump did, in fact, increase the amount of children coming over the border. Not children coming over the border, the amount of children separated at the border.
Well, here's the thing, and just to go with Colin's point, yeah, we don't think Obama is the greatest president. In fact, we both think he's overrated, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's crap, right? He's not. And so here's the thing, and Colin kind of touched on this. Yes, the policy started under Obama, but Trump, the whole management of the border under the Trump administration has been completely awful. I mean, what was it the other day? A fifth person died in Immigration Customs Enforcement custody.
And we're acting like this is somehow like a new thing that's going on.
Well, I mean, here's the
we might be hearing about it, in all the major news outlets for the first time, but that doesn't make it news.
But does it being an old thing, does it make it less egregious?
I mean, are you...
No, but it makes it something that you can't exactly pin on the current president.
Well, we just stated that...
Well, here's the thing.
We just stated that we believe Obama has some responsibility.
Well, no, that's not... But see, this question began, are there any points on which I agree with Donald Trump, to which our friend Ali over here said that to name a policy of Donald Trump, separating kids at the border, and now we're going to go into...
Well, here's the
Kids
thing.
dying at the border, that's got nothing to do with it.
We'll give you this.
I'll
give you this, right? We can't pinpoint, the deaths, these unfortunate deaths completely, or pinpoint them because of Donald Trump's handling of the situation, even though you could. But I guess
if these have anything to do to him, then the more that occurred under the Obama administration must also be directly tied to that.
But
man.
here's the thing.
Well, I would attribute those that did happen under Obama to him. As I think we all could if we're being fair.
In which case, Trump has brought the rate of this down, and more power to him.
Donald Trump has not brought the rate.
Well,
of this
here's
down.
the thing. Do you think
more people died at the border in Obama's years than have so far during Trump's years?
Well, I mean, that's
and have so far comparatively.
That's because Obama's was in office for 8 years. Trump's only been in 2.5. But anyway,
comparatively,
here's the thing. So let's
he's deported less people.
Hold on. Less
people have died at the border. I mean, it's been going pretty well at the border.
Let's say this, right? Those deaths, whatever. We'll give it to you, not because of Trump, not because of Trump's actions, but however, how about the reaction to it? I mean, if 5 people have died, don't you think that the president should react to and institute?
Well, what's the president going to do? What's he going to do about that?
I mean, Immigration and Customs Enforcement lies under his jurisdiction.
Okay, but what is he going to do about that?
Push for reform. I mean, there's
he is pushing for reform.
For what? For ICE? For Immigration and Customs Enforcement? Like, what kind of reform?
What kind of reform do you want?
Reform, whereas maybe training where you don't have ICE officers going and stopping school buses and handling children. Or
what are they going to do, let them through?
I also want rhetoric that doesn't encourage groups of so-called vigilantes to assault people at the border.
Well,
and
we could
commit
talk.
citizens
We
arrest.
could talk for the next 48 hours about Trump's rhetoric, and I think we'd find a lot of agreement between you and I over, what he should be doing with that. But his rhetoric and what he's doing at the border are not the inseparable issues that people like to paint them as.
Well, his rhetoric and what he's doing at the border are very much tied together because his rhetoric set the stage for what he's doing at the border. And actually, one of a president's most powerful tools at his disposal is his rhetoric, is his bully pulpit. You know what I mean? So I really look at what's going on. I mean, he has pushed for an aggressive immigration policy that includes the continuation of separation at the border. And once again, we could both agree, or rather we could all agree, that that started under Barack Obama, and that's irreprehensible in my view. But nonetheless, he's continued that. And he's also created a rhetorical framework that has allowed people to start committing citizens arrests at the border. It has emboldened them to do so.
He has. That's why his Homeland Security resigned. That's why so many people. That's why he's failed at so much. That's why there's such a high turnover rate in his administration. Just how it is. But anyway, I guess moving on, and this away from the social immigration topics, and we can go back to this later. But
we'll put a pin in it.
So Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, your favorite Andy, has proposed a real corporate tax plan, which would tax every dollar earned by an American business after $100 million at 7%. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has spoken in favor of a 70% marginal tax on incomes exceeding $10 million. Now, before we let the hounds loose, do you have any moral or economic objections to Senator Warren's policy or Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's policy, and why?
Okay, so I want to preface this by just saying that I don't think that either of them are bad human beings or bad individuals, but I do think they're incredibly misguided, and I think that what they're doing is not in line with what they hope that is going to come about as a result of what they're pushing forward. Now one of the things that I do like about what Trump's been doing so far is that the economy has been doing pretty well lately, but the fact that it's been doing better doesn't mean that it's been doing as optimally as it could be, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's been doing so well that I think it's time to throw it into jeopardy. Now, if you decide that you're going to start just heaving taxes on businesses, on American businesses, which, as we all know, are already leaving the country faster than we would like, and we can disagree on what we'd like that number to be, but I think most people can come to some sort of agreement that businesses are leaving faster than they like, and they're not returning quite as fast as would be best for the American economy. And this is just another thing that's going to incentivize them to continue doing that. Now, Trump's had some success bringing some jobs that have left back. Personally, I think he's under-delivered on that, and he's promised us a lot more than he's given us, and I think he's got to do more to follow through on that particular campaign promise of his. But he has been doing some good work compared to his past couple of predecessors on that front, at least. And I don't think that we need another economic maverick in there to throw that into jeopardy and possibly reverse it.
So just quick, when you mean by past couple predecessors, do you mean obviously you're referring to President Obama?
I'm going back
President
to as far back as H.W. Bush.
H.W. Bush, even under Clinton, who left office with $1 billion surplus for the government.
Well, a surplus for the government's a lot different than companies leaving the country and outsourcing their labor elsewhere.
Who also got us out of the 1991 recession, what was caused by Reagan's tax cuts.
But now we're talking about two completely different things.
Well, I just wanted to clarify. That's it. So anyway, so you don't...
Yes, I think that even in all of those presidencies which were marked by their particular ups and downs, that labor has been outsourced at a rate that's been harmful to our economy. And that I think that the continuation of policies like those proposed by AOC and Senator Warren would probably contribute to that going even further along down that road.
I don't really think that's true, actually. For example, as you mentioned, there have been significant tax cuts levied by the Trump administration, and we really haven't seen large returns.
We've seen significantly larger returns than anything we've seen in the past couple decades.
No, we've seen...
It hasn't been perfect.
We've seen the deficit widen. We have seen companies like Apple, who were already going to start, creating more jobs, let Trump take credit for it and kind of just wash their hands right afterwards without that actually being the case. We haven't really seen that. But I do want to, mention that I do agree with you. You talked about some, like the economy not being as optimal as it could be. And I definitely want to point out that might be a rare moment of agreement between us, because as far as I'm concerned, sure, we have low unemployment.
I think no matter how the polls go, you round any amount of people in a room and ask them, is the economy where it should be? You get a pretty resounding no.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think we have low unemployment, but we have lots of people who are underemployed. We have increasing wage inequality. We have, of course, the long-standing languishing of the middle class, and especially this doesn't get talked about all that often, but the classes below the middle class, the working poor, and while that happens, we've only seen the rich getting richer, and Trump's, tax policy, which benefits overwhelmingly the rich, while adding a $10 million deficit or something like that over the next 10 years.
Run,
I just personally don't really see how that's really benefiting us all that much.
So there's a couple things there, and I'm not going in any particular order here. Our deficit's at what? We're hovering around $20 billion right now.
I think it's closer to trillions.
Trillion. That's what I meant to say. Right.
Yeah. I wish. It was.
Are you talking about the deficit or the overall debt?
Both are actually pretty high. Debt is that number that I just said. Deficit is still quite a bit up there.
So interestingly, the deficit has been higher under Trump than it has been over the last few years under Obama. So the deficit has gotten higher overall.
We should point out, deficit spending isn't always bad.
It's not.
No, deficit spending actually is. It's been a vital way to revitalize an economy that's been going down.
Get out of recessions.
No, I have no quarrels in theory with deficit spending.
But like going off if the economy is so well and we're not in a recession, why is the administration pushing such deficits?
Well, as I just said, just because the economy is doing a lot better than it has been in recent years doesn't mean that we can just kind of give up and say, all right, this is it. This is all we're going to do. This is the maximum that the American economy can handle, and whoever's losing out right
now. We're closing the economy, guys.
We're closing the economy.
Good job, guys. We're done for today.
No, I'm not asking. I'm asking because we all agree that government spending or deficit spending helps you get at recessions, or
it can.
It ameliorates it. But why? Well, what about deficit spending when the economy is doing so well right now? What does that say?
Deficit spending. People think of the word deficit and they think negative, because of how it appears in a lot of accounting statements. But deficit spending doesn't really mean anything besides you're spending in a deficit. And that deficit can be handled over any period of time which you assign to
But I mean, I
define
think
the deficit.
it's pretty bad when it adds to the debt, which is staggering right now, which is I think above $22 trillion. So I mean, I'm just curious to know if the economy is doing so well. Why is this administration pushing deficit spending when really they should be trying to balance the budget when they have the optimal time right now?
Also, I mentioned a lot modern monetary theory, right? And like one of the core tenets is deficit spending on part of the government is usually can be surplus in the hands of the consumer, the household, right? But you have to look at where where money is being spent by the government, because as is, we've been reducing, money going towards education, money going towards, things like healthcare, and what we're seeing a redirection towards instead is things like, covering up money lost from the tax cuts to the rich to other programs, but also the military. With the increase that Trump proposed to the military spending, you could pay for free college for state and public universities more than one time for everyone who needs it. So I think it's interesting. We also need to point that out, right? The deficit, the money that is being lost there, I say with quotes, isn't going towards things that are really helping out average people.
Okay, so I guess back to the question, really. We've digressed a bit, but I mean, Andy's given his answer. But so I guess the reason why, and Cole, I'm not sure when you wrote the docket, did you mean to put 7% for Warren? Did you mean 70% or
no 7%?
7%. So I'm not too familiar with Warren's tax plan. When it comes to Ocasio-Cortez's tax plan, where you tax 70% after every dollar after $10 million on income, I really don't have an objection to that, because I feel like, Andy, maybe you can enlighten me with your conservative thought.
Happy.
Oh, you can attempt to. I like one of the inherent contradictions of capitalism, and believe it or not, me and Colin are not.
Oh my God! You just said contradictions of capitalism. I like where this is going.
Exactly. So me and Colin, we're extremely progressive, right? But however, we're not for a post-capitalist society. In fact, we like capitalism, and we think that capitalism can do better when it's fair for everyone, right? We're social democrats in a way. However, so like I said, one of the inherent contradictions of capitalism that many people are waking up to right now is income inequality. So I guess, Andy, if we don't tax, this insane amounts of money and put it into the welfare of society, what do you think we should do to help stop or at least attempt to ameliorate income inequality?
Well,
and do you think we should, for starters?
Income inequality by itself is not indicative of a problem in capitalism, because it's a necessary feature of a capitalist society wherein people do different things. Some things work out better than others for other people, and as a result, that state of uncertainty exists. And
but
that's
is there an extent?
Forward.
So income inequality to you is inevitable in a capitalist society? Okay, I could see that. But is there an extent to when the gap becomes huge, where it actually endangers capitalism and society itself?
Well, first I want to push back on that a little bit, because fair enough, but that's assuming that all wealth comes from an individual's talent, their skill. But
I wouldn't say that's an assumption. I would just say that it's sort of an inevitable feature.
I mean, I think that's the only time when we can say...
If you imagine a society in which no income inequality exists, that is a Marxist society.
Sure, but when you look at the amount, which is something that I know Ali was leading towards, but when you look at the sheer amount of income inequality in this country, and you realize that it is generational, it would take 266 years for blacks to collectively gain the generational wealth that whites have, right? The fact that, the people who are rich now, massively rich, if you look back for the most part, save for a few anecdotes, a few potential tech billionaires here and there, you go and you see, their father, their grandfather, their great-grandfather, they were all extremely wealthy before that. The people, below them don't get that. If you live in a poor area and your schools, for example, are funded by the property tax of, those, inexpensive homes or project housing or, cheap apartments, you are not getting a lot of money going to your schools. And that's just, it's, perpetuating that. So most people, I hear you say that, you don't necessarily think that, that it has to be based on merit entirely, but most people assume, that the cream will automatically rise to the top, and therefore inequality is okay because the people who do the best are the people who are the best.
Well,
but that's not inherently
here.
true.
Let's take a pause here before I lose track of everything that was said in the last couple of minutes.
If you haven't noticed, Colin speaks in paragraphs. These very, very detailed, eloquent paragraphs.
Thank you,
Craig. There is a subset of American wealth which is concentrated in the hands of a very select few.
Yes.
But very much of what we call the wealthy, those are these people are not descendants of kings. These people are not descendants, for the most part, of King George, whose money has been continuously given to his many descendants ever since. These people possibly inherited money from their father. That father possibly inherited money from their father. At some point, that money was made. And when it is a principle of our society, it always has been a principle, and I hope it always will be a principle, that when you make money doing just about anything, you get to decide, insofar as that money is yours and your own, that you get to decide where that money goes.
What is it called? Progeniture or whatever?
Primogeniture?
Yeah, that's actually not really... that's actually not a foundational belief necessarily of America, in that they did not really want essentially like aristocracies or monarchies to occur where someone who managed to amass money, like say Fred Trump, can just pass along, I guess you could say in quotes, undeservingly that money to his children without them doing anything to earn it themselves, because we have, laws against that kind of property transfer.
So Colin's right. So actually, one of the things that Alex de Tocqueville, a French aristocrat,
it's de Tocqueville,
right? When he came to America, one of the things he noticed about America and why it was better than the old world, as he called it, was because they didn't have this idea, as Colin said, primogeniture, which is basically inheritance to your firstborn son, or just inheritance to your family, specifically the firstborn son. And so, Andy, you made a point where I have to agree with you. I think it's important. An important aspect of our society is when people make money, they should keep it, right? So that's why I think when 60% of America's wealth is inherited, I think that's completely wrong, and I think that our society is going to a direction which is counter to the founding. And so you're right. When you make money, you should. But the wealthy doesn't always make their own money.
They usually don't.
They don't. So what does that say?
When we talk about the wealthy, mind you, we're usually not talking about someone in Connecticut making like 100,000. Yeah, that is definitely wealthy, right? And that's certainly above the median income in Connecticut. But we're usually talking about the 1%.
When you have a concept of super wealthy people, these people are not Scrooge McDuck sitting in a room going diving in a thing of gold coins. They don't have wallets just popping full of cash at all times. Their money's tied up in things that, quite frankly, it would be logistically difficult to divvy up and redistribute in the ways that
have you heard of a value-added tax? They have it in Europe, right? When you buy something, you get a huge tax on it, right? Specifically,
but what happens when the things aren't sold?
Well, here's the thing: that happens, the tax is higher in more expensive items. For example, like yacht. So logistically, not even logistically, right? You said that it would be hard to tax wealthy people who have most of their money, net worth in assets, right?
Right.
Well, in a way, you could stop that or fix that by having VAT taxes, value-added taxes, whereas it would be uber expensive, even for a super wealthy person to buy a yacht. And if they do, a lot of that money goes into, the total.
A couple problems there. That still doesn't solve a problem of inheritance, where no money is being transferred for the possession. I agree.
It doesn't solve the problem of inheritance, but it does.
Well, it doesn't solve the problem of inheritance. The other thing is
I'm referring to your issue of how it would be logistically difficult.
The other thing is that the way tax code works, you can only tax that which has liquid value, and so a lot of upper level financial transactions don't happen with cash. They don't happen with checks. So they don't happen with any kind of liquid currency. Two rich people could trade one thing for the other, and a value-added tax, such as the one in Europe, doesn't really have a way of assessing the value of that.
Well, that's true.
And even if it did, it would not tax the value off of the item in question. It wouldn't tax the value of the person selling it, who has all these assets, it would tax the value of the person buying it.
Well, so for example, Liz Warren is another person, right? Who, or even that policy we're talking about, the real corporate tax plan, right?
Right.
That is another thing that would do a really great job to dealing with some of the difficulties that arise when trying to tax the ultra wealthy, and that a lot of them have assets wrapped up in business, right? And a lot of businesses, of course, are going to be owned by the ultra wealthy. And if you look, her tax plan basically for that, what it includes is it's going based off not just the money that you report to the IRS, because we all know there are many loopholes so that you can report a lot less to the IRS than you are reporting to investors. But that would be tied to the amount of money that you're reporting to your investors, right? And of course, you're not going to lie to your investors because you want your stock to have value.
Well, that's how that's Enron.
Well, they lie to inflate their value, right? You're not gonna. That's another thing. You're not really going to want to inflate your value if that means inflated taxes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess moving on, because we still have one more major question. So I guess this one won't bring as much of a debate as the last two have, but
you sure? There's been a lot of debate on the last two. Like I won't mind keeping
honestly,
it up.
I feel like Andy, this might be a.
We might agree.
This won't be a curveball. Anyway. What Democratic candidate so far do you think has the best chance of defeating Trump in 2020? Also, do you think that Democrats would make a mistake in choosing someone on the progressive left, or I'm just going to say the real left, right? Like Elizabeth Warren or Sanders. What do you think, Andy?
Am I allowed to say none? Is that a viable answer to this question?
Sure, but why?
No, So I'll preface it by saying that I don't think if any of these people that have declared so far, or even the ones that are in the margin and in the news, I don't think any of them are going to be able to pull off a sweeping victory. Now,
but what about Buttigieg? He's so
I'll get to
gay.
Buttigieg, don't worry. Look, people who are educated about politics, people that care about politics, our cohort, we make the mistake all the time of thinking that most Americans care about anything as much as we do. I mean, and it's not that I'm trying to call the country stupid. We're a highly educated country, but the fact is that most people don't care about most political issues. Mm-hmm. And even for the people that do care, they usually have one or two that they care about, and that's it. And besides that, they go with whatever party aligns with that, and that's just how it is. So I don't think that a lot of the nuances that are being picked up in the media, that are being reported every day, and that people like us are talking about on the air, I don't think most people care about all that stuff, at least not insofar as the people that I just described do.
Do you think real nuance is being pushed on the media? I feel like oftentimes it isn't.
Well, we can get into a discussion.
Very rarely discussed. It's about 6% of election coverage.
Well, we can get into discussion of the media some other time. My only point here is that we make a mistake of thinking that people are paying very close attention to things that oftentimes are not being paid attention to as much as we think they are. And for the most part, it has always been the case, and I don't see any reason to doubt that it will continue to be the case for the foreseeable future, that people vote with their wallets, right? It's extremely difficult to unseat a sitting president in a good economy, particularly difficult when that president rose to power as the economy was turning around. And we can debate his role in that economic turnaround, but the fact is that he did come into economy, and shortly after that, the economy really started to rebound.
So you said that when the president was coming to power, when the economy was turning around, are you implying that the economy was turning around?
No, I think Trump had a great deal to do with it, but that's a whole other question, and we still haven't answered this one first. But my only point here is, regardless of whether or not you can get behind my view on what Trump had to do with that, whether or not he had anything to do with that, even if it had nothing to do with him and it was entirely on Obama, it's still that's my point. We are discussing that. Most people aren't thinking about that. Most people think, well, you know what? I'm making a little bit more money now. I'm a little bit more financially secure than I was. Like, hey, maybe if I vote for Trump again, it'll keep getting better.
Well, then it's great, because a lot of people are going to be like, wow, my tax return was not that great this year. I'm going to go with someone else. So in that case, I'm kind of glad to hear that.
So the aggregate American has, at least from a purely numerical standpoint, done a little bit better over the past couple of years than they have in the years before. And most people will take that as a sign of, oh, Trump's like doing all right. Guess I better vote for him. And most people aren't going to, really look into anything besides that. So for that reason, you could have a Democrat that's got ridiculously good policy ideas, that's an awesome orator, just a real character, and he's at a pretty significant disadvantage just because of that.
I mean, yeah, that's true. The incumbency advantage is always a potent force.
Well,
the incumbency advantage, particularly in a case where the economy is doing well,
even
more,
really good indicator.
But
yes.
compounding off of that is that Trump, for whatever reason, could not have entered office at a better time for seeking re-election, because he came in off the bounds of a recession. And now, compared to 10 years ago, we're doing really well.
This is true, but we have been on actually, a bit of, what is it, like a 9 or 10 year upward climb of continued growth.
When you go that low, the law of regression, when you go that low, it's hard to keep going lower consistently.
We're in a boom bust cycle, and eventually we're going to bust. And
sure, we are.
This sound terrible, but I can't help but hope it's close to November 2020.
That's the only thing. See, this will go away if by some act of God, a couple months before the election, we go into a downturn that we don't pull out of. That's the only thing I could see.
Guys, we're ending the economy.
That's what I could see. Putting this into a real pickle for our president. But the way he is right now, I don't think he has anything to worry about.
Here's my prediction. Right, the next recession, like most recessions, won't be on the financial side. It'll come from the consumer side. We have recessions all the time, right?
Sure.
2008 and then Great Depression, the other big one,
recession.
were both on the financial side, right? And that's why it took forever to go on. So I'm thinking, who knows? Maybe it could happen on the financial side too. I mean, the Trump administration is cutting back so many regulations.
Well, the indicators are that it's going to have something to do with the student debt bubble popping.
Student debt. There's also a bubble around subprime auto loans.
If I had to just pin a nail on something, I would go student debt. I think it's a safe bet for.
So I think
whenever it is, that's
aggregate with auto loans is going to be the one-two punch.
Here's the thing.
Well, sure, but you got to remember, people retire by the day, and more people enter the workforce. But now people are doing it with these massive student debts. So it's inevitable if something doesn't happen that it's going to cause a recession. The question is just whether it will be the next one.
Let me finish up this question before we get into, because I want to ask you.
We still got to talk about who's the Democrat.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Who is it for you? Do you want us to throw out some names for you, like?
No.
Booker.
I do know a couple names. Look, Biden's inherently at the same advantage that Hillary had. We have no reason to suspect.
That hurts, man.
We have no reason to suspect right now, or at least I haven't seen any reason to suspect that Biden isn't gaining the same kind of purchased, Clinton name brand control over the Democratic Party that the other candidates don't have, and especially after the last election cycle and his close relationship with them, I see no reason to believe that he is not putting himself at an unethical advantage right now. So you have to take into account that he's probably got a leg up on everyone else in terms of money and in terms of, buying power. That being said, the person that's going to pose a real threat to Trump isn't that, because I'm confident that Trump will be able to run against that simply by saying, look, this is just 2016 again. We know what happened then. Why are we even here? So, I mean, and you're rightfully so for them. The Democrats are starting to throw out some mavericks of their own. We talked about Buttigieg earlier. And I, as an orator, I like the guy. I think he's a really charismatic dude.
Charisma only gets so far, though. He has no policy.
He is Biden. He's another Biden.
Well,
Biden's way worse, because Biden has policy. It's just terrible policy.
He's basically younger Biden, right? And
well, he is, but it's people like that get energy. And the energy, I mean, people like to, and I might sound a little bit weird now because I was just talking about how Biden has quite possibly already bought several favors, but energy is really a component that you can't overlook, especially this early, because he's had energy pretty much since he declared.
He had energy before.
And even before, but, I mean, since he declared, I mean, he mowed right over Beto O'Rourke.
I think
rest in peace, Beto.
Beto got eaten by Buttigieg way before Biden entered the race.
That's my point, though, is he has this momentum of being able to take over people that previously were among the faces of the party.
Buttigieg has not disappeared because Biden's come. Also, Biden has a really mixed thing going on in terms of advantage and sway with the Democratic elite, because on one hand, yeah, he's the former vice president of the last Democratic president who was, fairly popular, right? That means something. But he was really pissed off because Beto managed to get a lot of Obama donors, big Obama donors, and when the DNC elite were having these meetings about what to do with Bernie, Buttigieg was at the table. Biden wasn't.
Well, here's the thing. I'm pretty sure before Biden announced his run, I'm pretty sure Kamala Harris was the establishment favorite.
Yeah, because you heard so many people talk about her in the media, and in real life it would be like, what's your opinion on Kamala Harris? And like, who was that?
Yeah. So Andy, from what I'm hearing is Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg they won't beat Trump according to you, but they have.
Well, I got to be right out in the open. I don't think any of these people are going to beat Trump. But if we're just talking chances, if we're talking about sway and momentum, you basically have two groups of candidates. You have the Joe Bidens, who are what Hillary tried to do, and we'll see if they can pull it off in a way that she wasn't able to do. And you have people like Pete Buttigieg, to a lesser extent, Kirsten Gillibrand.
What about Sanders?
Beto, although
where does
see.
Sanders lie? Sanders doesn't fit in any of these groups. Where is he? And he
was the other category.
He was
right?
the Democratic frontrunner before Biden run, and he's arguably in second.
I mean,
he is in second.
I would say if you look at numerical support, Biden had a third of the campaign contributors.
But I think you also need to take into account. Look at Sanders. He's in second place, but it's not a close second place. All right, he is significantly behind Joe Biden, and this coming the year after he led this, what was certainly. My thoughts about his platform aside, he led a very successful political movement. He got a lot of people engaged in politics that weren't before, and he got a lot of people thinking and talking about things that they weren't before.
Let's think about some things, right?
And look at how far that's gotten him. Not actually that far.
Let's think about something. No, he's definitely gotten far. He went from being a no-name candidate who was a bit of a joke back in 2016. I remember everyone was like,
I'm talking
he's
about
cool.
this year.
I like him because I'm 18, but at the end of the day, like, he doesn't have a chance at winning. So
I think what it is, my
serious.
point is that I think it's telling that when you have someone that was pretty much the face of the energy of the Democratic Party going into until right before the election, who was the face of the Democratic Party at that point in time. Now look at Joe Biden can just come in and walk all over.
Joe Biden has the support. I'm going to say
boomers.
Of the baby boomers, and we have seen a lot of polls have somewhat disproportionately sampled boomers in their polls, which would, of course, favor Biden. Which isn't to say that
you mean to tell me that the polls are being dishonest?
That
could never happen.
Which isn't to say that he wouldn't be ahead anyway, and I think he would have somewhat of a lead anyway. But I think the sheer the volume of his lead, I think, is somewhat bolstered by that. But I also want to point out that the people who vote in the primaries are usually more politically sophisticated, we'll say, and they're also usually more, let's say, on the Democratic side, left wing, on the Republican side, right wing, right? Whereas Biden is, we could vaguely call him center left. I mean, I think Ollie and I would be comfortable with saying he was a pretty good Republican vice president, right?
He's center right.
Let's go here then. If the people in the primaries are voting more left, or we're talking about the Democrats in the Republican Party, they'd be voting more right. But here they're voting more left, and they're not voting for the candidate that I think all of us can agree is significantly more to the left.
Well, I mean, no one's voted yet. What you're seeing are polls.
I'm using the word voting to mean it's intention to vote, but we can.
Well, what you're seeing are polls.
We can go off that. The point is that they're at least at the time of the poll, they're throwing their support behind someone who is agreeably not very far left when you compare him to the likes of Bernie Sanders. But these are the people that are the most reliable left voters that would probably consider themselves the most to the left. And Bernie is not getting help.
Look at the blue wave, Look at the blue wave in 2018, for example. What we saw there, in no small part due to just anger at Trump and the fact that he won. And also, I want to give a shout out and some credit to March for Our Lives. I think they did a good job of invigorating younger voters. We did see an increase in younger voters in 2018, and we're yet to see whether or not that will continue, and whether that will be something that's actually institutionalized and become a real trend in politics as opposed to just being a one-time outlier. But if that was to happen again, like you said, Sanders does have a lot of energy, and we can agree that there's energy, particularly in the young crowd. I think it might even be good if people. I mean, you never want. It's election strategy. You never want to say, "Look, we have this in the bag," because people are less likely to vote if they don't think it's a contended election, right?
Always right.
I hope some people, right, will be comforted by the fact that they think Biden will 100% get in, and people who are Bernie supporters because they've been biting their nails at the polls for 8 months or whatever, end up coming out and supporting him in droves. Because look at Hillary, numerically had a lot more supporters. Potentially even in the states that swung Trump, but people didn't like her all that much, and they thought she was going to win anyway due to the media coverage.
Well, you could even argue that she won the election. Let's be real.
Let's not go down
as
that.
happy as I would be to get into this
I'm
right
just
now.
pointing out. But anyway, we'll have to wait to see the debates. But I'm just a little comment going off of Colin about the young people. We were all 17, I believe, when 2016 came around, right? None of us were 18. We weren't able to vote. Am I
Not in
correct?
the general. No.
Could not
exactly,
vote, no.
right? And so our generation, because I believe we're not millennials, we're Generation Z. Our generation was extremely hyped about Sanders, at least on the left side, right? And
I mean, look at the data. People are hyped on the right side, too, about Sanders.
Years later, we have now the right to vote. So we'll have to see, because, I mean, like you said, there have been polls out there which have skewed and have sampled more baby boomers or people above 60, 65. But polls where if they've sampled 18 to 25-year-olds have overwhelmingly supported Sanders. So Andy has a point where as the people have to come out and vote and to see if...
Is that how an election works? Oh.
But we'll have to see to the debates. I feel like the debates would definitely be fun. Andy, I know that the Democratic Party, at least this year, maybe last year it was over the summer, but isn't your ideal party. But only the real ones know what I'm talking about. But we'll have to watch the debates. It should be fun, We should get like the sweep viewing together. But anyway, I guess one question. I guess this might be our last question. Is you talked about student debt.
Yes, sir.
And how about there's a bubble? I guess we can all agree that the situation is pretty bad with student
It's an
debt.
issue.
So how do we solve it, Andy?
We don't. We let the market figure everything out.
I mean, we're all in
Well,
college right now. Some of us are paying loans, some of us are not.
To an extent, yeah, look. And this is something that I get into a lot with people, and usually they'll stop listening to me after I say this first sentence and they won't let me explain it. But here we go. Less people need to go to college.
No, I'm kidding. Go on.
Less people need to go to college. And I don't mean to say that people that want to go to college and will be helped by going to college should not be able to go to college. What I'm saying is society in a whole, and specifically the public education system, has gone from being a way to educate our kids so that they could be more successful and more productive in the real world to just being a, entry will prepare you to get into a college kind of thing. And the reality of the situation is, for a lot of people, college is not the best decision to make. For a lot of people that, A, don't really know what they want to do, or would be comfortable and probably better suited doing something that doesn't warrant a college degree.
So you have
for those people,
Yang outlook.
for those people to go to college and put themselves into debt doesn't really make a whole lot of financial sense. And since a lot of these people anyway will then go to work jobs that don't inherently require a college degree, it seems like a waste of money. And as a result, you have this massive increase in demand from trade employers that are willing to hire you right out of high school and pay for the education required to do that.
We should be investing more in trade schools, and
Well, it's not just trade schools. It's a systemic issue where we are telling our children that going to college is, if not necessary, the default. And that by not going to college, you're inherently at a disadvantage, and for a lot of people, that's not true.
So I get like I said, it's the culture. Anyway, how about we all take the first step and all of us drop out of college right now?
Let's do it. Let's do it right now.
Forget Fairfield.
I don't need
Might
it.
as well.
I'm a sworn heir.
But I agree with you. I think that there's too much emphasis. I think people.
I think we've allowed ourselves as a society to let a bunch of mostly private institutions serve the public in a way that at least the ideal public government would try to, and in doing so we've created this need and this uncomfortable feeling around not going to college, where if you suggest that people shouldn't go to college, it just doesn't sound right. You're saying that you're not giving people opportunity. Well, no, it's you're not giving them opportunity But this is opportunity that, for at least a lot of subsets of people probably would be lost. And they could probably find better opportunity making a different decision, or at least waiting to make that decision until they had a clear path forward.
College has always been, college was about just simply learning, right? It's not supposed to guarantee you a job and all that. And I think that's
in theory, but its purpose in society is to prepare you for work.
Yeah. Well, right now it is.
Well, I mean, I'm fine.
Well, sure, go back 700 years and going to college was just how you became a priest.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you can't tell me that, like, Isaac Newton went to college because he wanted to, make money.
No, he went to college because he wanted to get a girl.
You're right about that. Just like Colin.
I thought Newton was gay.
That's why I went to college. No. Okay, so you see, overall, I am fine with, like, as a society, especially if people can make enough money doing a trade or, doing something else that they could live comfortably. I'm totally fine with saying, hey, there are other options besides college, and you should potentially look into them. I just worry, though, and obviously there already is a huge chasm between the ability and opportunity, rather, to achieve between, different racial groups, different people who come from different socioeconomic classes. I just worry that, if implemented poorly, a shift to telling people, hey, you could do a trade if you want, might become a shift in telling certain groups of people you should do a trade, and certain groups of people you definitely should go to college, and exacerbating the tiered system we already have in America.
The problem that I see there, there are two kinds of people that go to college. There are the people that have a lot of money and don't really need, I'm not saying their lives are perfect, but in the grand scheme of things are in a pretty good point where they can go to college, study mostly whatever they want, and they'll probably be fine, if not well. Then you have people that are going to college because they're not in that same position. They probably wouldn't be able to find a lot of good opportunity without it, and they're going to college in search of that opportunity.
This is true. I'm in college specifically because if I become president one day, they might forgive my debt. That's it.
That's why. So the point is that
let's wait until you graduate first. And then
the way out of it is not a change in how we do college, although I think that individually colleges have gotten really out of hand with how they allocate their money, which
sounds like you want more government regulation.
I don't need regulation. We could get into this another time, but the way forward is by the individual college, and by encouraging kids to make college choices, not in the ways that they make them now. But the way forward is an educational way forward, where you need to explain in high school, rather than treating high school as a gateway to a 4-year college. You need to explain, look, you could go to college. Here's a bunch of reasons why you might want to go to college. If you're thinking about doing any of this with your life, it might be a good idea to go to college right out of high school. Versus, you're not really sure what you want to do. You don't really have any preference for what you do, but you want to be secure. You want to have a good way forward. Try a trade school, Try a certification program and get into this line of work. See how that works for you, and you can always go back and change your mind later.
Andy Bell, the future Dr. Jordan P. Peterson. Thank you so much for coming on the Sweeping, for being our first conservative or far-right guest on the show.
Well, whatever you want to call it.
Nazi. I said it. We pulled off the Scooby-Doo mask. We see your National Socialist.
Richard Spencer's brother.
We're a little bit different, but we're friends nonetheless. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Andy.